when the people say, this is wrong, this is corrupt, and we're going to topple your government violently, which happened twice. And you have two revolutions in the country like this, it results in a sort of weakening of all the fabric of the state. And there are a lot of people in Kyrgyzstan who are concerned. I mean, while they generally don't like a big, strong state, they nevertheless feel they do need police, and they do need some level of order and security, and they need public services, utilities, water, streets being maintained, things like that. There's a lot of concern that, this whole system is just going to come down and collapse, and they'll be in a state of anarchy, which people really don't want either.
Well, yeah, and the bad kind of anarchy, things on fire. And you were pointing out that earlier about the ethnic divisions that have been exacerbated by all this, right? Kind of minor pogroms or something?
Yeah, there have been these pogroms that have gone on between Kyrgyz and Uzbeks in the south, and this is an area where they lived together harmoniously for more than 1,000 years, no problems, and then suddenly, recently, we're seeing these conflicts occur, and it seems that these things have been instigated by political figures who want to use this as a cover for their own machinations.
Yeah.
A lot like what we saw in Yugoslavia.
Well, it's America spreading liberty. All right, everybody, hang tight. We'll be right back with Other Scott Horton some more.
This is the Liberty Radio Network, broadcasting the latest liberty-oriented audio content 24 hours a day at LRN.FM.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We're talking Kyrgyzstan with Kyrgyzstan. I think I put too many K's in there. With the Other Scott Horton. Harpers.org/subjects/no comment. Lots of comments, though. Good ones. I was lucky enough to be on the email list long ago, back before it became a blog. And now it really is one of the most important blogs out there. And I apologize to you, Scott, and to y'all in the audience for not having been prepared for this interview and reading all what you've written here about the corruption racket in Central Asia, as you call it, and the upcoming elections here in Kyrgyzstan and what have you. But anyway, when we left off at the break, we were talking about, you were saying, I think, that there hasn't been ethnic strife in this part of Central Asia in a long time. This has been manufactured as part of the crisis of the corruption that America has engendered there?
Well, when I go down there and interview people, everyone without exception tells me, that these pogroms that occurred were carefully instigated, carefully plotted. They talk about signal flares being sent up before the attacks began, about military and police vehicles being used, about people in uniforms, and so forth. So, this wasn't the eruption of some long simmering ethnic conflict. That's ridiculous. It's a decision by some extremely cynical political figures to try and spark an interethnic conflict, and to do that as cover for their own political designs, whatever they are. But what we see disagreement about is exactly who the instigators are. We see fingers pointed at the deposed former president and local crime lords and local political figures and others. So, I'd say that part of it's still unclear.
Okay, so I'm overstating it to say that this is somehow cause and effect from America's intervention there.
Well, I think there's really no doubt, and pretty much all the people I talk with in Kyrgyzstan agree that the United States played a very negative role in all of this. That is, its habits of bribing local officials and doing it in a way that became just like obvious and publicly known within a matter of months. That this discredited the government and led to the collapse of these governments. And so it's really sort of weakened the state as a whole, and may lead to the collapse of their country. There are a lot of people who fear that. But we'd also have to say it's not just the fact that the U.S. is bribing foreign officials with these huge aviation fuel contracts. It's a lot of other things that are going on that cause this to happen. And, of course, the Kyrgyz politicians are no angels themselves.
Yeah, of course not. They're politicians.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so now it's kind of ridiculous to do this with only just, 5 minutes to discuss it, but I got to hear an update from you, if there is one, about your groundbreaking work in Harper's magazine about the Guantanamo quote-unquote suicides of July 2006.
Well, I'd say the latest information that I've got has to do with the informants, because we had 5 soldiers who came forward and provided their narratives. And what I'm hearing right now is that there seems to be some sort of concerted effort going on to drive them all out of the military, because they were all still serving at the time I researched this and interviewed them. And they were some of them were fearful that they would feel that they would suffer some repercussions from speaking, but others, told me that they heard from senior officers who told them just tell the truth and don't worry about it. But it seems now that the forces of retaliation are weighing in. I'll have some more details about that shortly, but I can't get into that right now. Another thing I've been looking at is the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, which of course handled the investigation, and I'm looking at their involvement in the investigation of a series of other deaths that occurred in detention, not necessarily Guantanamo, but elsewhere. And what I'm seeing is, a consistent pattern of NCIS being involved in covering up and providing cover stories for the deaths that wind up being exposed. So that's troubling.
And now, I think I've asked you this before, but I don't remember what your answer was. Colonel Larry Wilkerson and General Barry McCaffrey both have said more than 100 people were tortured to death or died in torture custody, or whatever their euphemism, but basically that. But I think somewhere in the back of my mind is the idea that somebody found out that the number was much more than that, or at least twice that or something.
Well, of course, the U.S. government won't agree that there's anybody who was tortured to death, except perhaps maybe Al-Jawad. In all the other cases, they will reject the use of the word torture. They'll say that people died of causes other than the administration of these techniques. But I would say right now it's quite clear that the total number of people who died from the use of extraordinary techniques tops 100.
Extraordinary techniques.
Extraordinary techniques, which would include waterboarding, long time standing, sleep deprivation, any of a long list of techniques. And
George Carlin, I miss
half
you.
Of those techniques clearly are torture, and the others used in combination could well constitute torture.
Yeah, American language is a wonderful thing. I got to tell you, you just change rain into sunshine with the turn of a phrase.
Well, you look at the New York Times; they're really great operators on this front, and if you go back and you look at their reporting, they'll report stories out of the former Soviet Union, out of China. In fact, quite recently they had a major article, front page article, talking about a woman who'd been subjected to sleep deprivation and other forms of torture. So they're openly describing what happened to this woman as torture. She was an ethnic Korean who had escaped from China and sought asylum in the United States. They openly describe it as torture. And, of course, one of their readers points out that these exact techniques you're calling torture here are being used and sanctioned by the United States government, and your own executive editor has defended the practice of not calling them torture. So, the New York Times attitude, country, we can call it torture, but not with the United States.
Yeah, it really is the setter of the agenda and the double standard on a pretty much daily basis over there. I mean, there's a million examples. I mean, you talked about the neocons' push for war with Iran. Here's America's got 5,000 hydrogen bombs and holds the entire world hostage all day, every day, going mad about Iran's civilian electricity program that's safeguarded by IAEA inspectors.
Yep.
It's the very same thing. And, it's funny when you talk about the way that they never admit that the torture caused the death, or those extraordinary measures caused the death of any of these people. It's just like the conversation we were having earlier with Will Grigg about when the cops taser someone to death. It's never the taser that did it. It's always, their heart condition, and they just chose this time to die when the taser happened to be going off. It really is the same thing. We're bringing this warfare state home to our own communities.
Well, and it's a failure of independent investigation because, in theory, there should be an independent organ that, conducts the investigation and tells you what's happened. And, that's not happening with respect to the military. In fact, the organizations that conduct the investigation, like you look at the NCIS and you look at their own charter, their first responsibility is helping to prosecute the war. And their second objective is preserving the government's secrets. So law enforcement is way down the list.
Right.
And I think that results in, these people die, and then we hear this, really feeble, made-up explanation for why the deaths occurred. And, the problem with that is that obviously we need to change this entire system and get rid of the procedures that are causing these deaths. And as long as there's a refusal to acknowledge what's actually going on, it's difficult to get at the problems. But I will give Barack Obama credit because, when he came in, within the matter of a few weeks, there was definitely some heavy modification of some of these procedures. So they became considerably milder. But I'm not happy with them. There's still problems with them.
Well, and they're still criminal, right? Appendix M is what you're talking about. That's what we're reduced to is just the Army Field Manual, but they rewrote it.
I'd say, I think that's right. I think generally the uniformed military went back to acceptable practices. The problem really became JSOC, which was running its own secret prison system, and which really has not towed the official Department of Defense line on procedures, and which has, ready access to use these Appendix M techniques.
Right. Well, and we still don't know if there are other CIA secret prisons in the world. They still may be operating prisons in Morocco and Thailand for all we know, right?
Yeah, I think what's happened is that the separate self-standing CIA black sites have been closed down. But I think the CIA does continue to operate what I call proxy prisons. So we know about the one in Rabat, and there seems to be similar arrangements like that in Egypt and a handful of other countries.
My goodness. All right, we're all out of time. Thank you for giving us this whole hour. I really do appreciate it, Scott.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
All right, everybody, that is the Other Scott Horton, heroic international anti-torture human rights lawyer from harpers.org and Columbia University. Check out his great blog, No Comment.